Hello, everyone. Shall we begin the South and Southwest Asia Insights breakout room? Good morning again. My name is Nagesh Kumar. I'm a Director of South and Southwest Asia Office of UN ESCAP. You have just heard the presentation of the overall Asia Pacific report and its highlights. Now we can zoom on the status of the progress of SDGs in South and Southwest Asia. This is a sub-region comprising 10 countries. All the 8 members of South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, and Turkey and Islamic Republic of Iran. So to go to the next slide, we saw the progress of the Asia Pacific region in a very similar chart. Now this one is specific to the South and Southwest Asian countries, and you find that the maximum progress or the greatest progress this sub-region has made is in the top 3 goals. The ending power. Yes?
I'm sorry, you have to upload your PowerPoint presentation. It is not visible.
Oh, it is not uploaded? I thought it is uploaded.
You have to click the share screen and then upload it.
Oh, sorry. Is it visible?
Yes, we can see. So maybe you can, start from the beginning, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Can you see the full screen or?
Yes, we see the full screen and your picture as well. So this is perfect.
Oh, very good. All right. So, let me start once again. The progress in South and Southwest Asia sub-region. And we go to the first figure or chart, where you see that the greatest progress that South Asia or South and Southwest Asian countries have made with respect to the SDG achievement is in the top 3 or first 3 goals: the ending poverty goal, zero hunger goal, and good health and well-being, kind of these SDG goals. But in most others, it is very much behind. And in 5 of them, which are put in red, it is actually regressing. So we need to reverse the trend of regression to achieve the SDG goals and targets. And these 5 are reduce inequalities. So we are actually increasing inequalities rather than reducing them. The sustainable cities and communities, we have to bring the pattern of urbanization into more sustainable kind of manner. And the climate action, we need to take some strong steps to reverse this progress on climate action. Life below water, again, we need to do some reversal. And in peace, justice, and strong institutions, again, we need to strengthen the resolve to reverse this trend of adverse growth or adverse progress. Yes, this is a chart where we have highlighted where the progress existing trend will be adequate to achieve the target by 2030, where acceleration of the progress will be needed, and where we need to reverse the trend. So the yellow bars show that we need to accelerate progress in many areas in South and Southwest Asia. So I will just now focus attention on where the acceleration of the progress is needed to achieve the target. And these are highlighted in the, or zoomed in this slide. So as you see, South Asia in particular, out of the South and Southwest Asian sub-region, need to make a strong progress or accelerate the progress with respect to nutrition related goals, which are under goal 2. And I will come to the very high extent of stunting and malnutrition among children of this sub-region. Then, although some progress has been made in respect to health related goals, there is more needed to be done, especially for universal health coverage and a number of other health related targets, including road safety, which kills a lot of people in Southern Asia. With respect to education related goal 4, number of targets need to be accelerated, and goal 7 with respect to access to energy services and energy efficiency, we need to strengthen and accelerate progress again. With respect to goal 8, which is about economic growth and infrastructure, there again we need to accelerate progress, especially about youth employment. There are a lot of people not having decent work opportunities. So there, South Asia needs to accelerate progress. And the goal 9, which is about infrastructure development and industrialization, a lot of work needs to be done, especially on sustainable and inclusive industrialization, sustainable and clean industries, and research and development. And goal 10, which is about inequalities, and I earlier mentioned that this is where South Asian countries are moving in a reverse direction. We need to reverse that trend of widening or deteriorating equality situation and inequalities widening. That needs to be reversed. And another goal, which is goal 17, about means of implementation. South Asia has to augment its means of implementation, especially the financial resources through domestic resource mobilization. This is one region or sub-region that has lowest tax to GDP ratios. So something needs to be done to augment the resources that can be deployed for SDG achievement. To sum up some of these key trends that are emerging from this analysis, one is, of course, child malnutrition. That remains a key challenge in South Asia. More than 40 million under 5 children, which is 33% of such children, remain severely or moderately stunted And this is a proportion highest among all Asia-Pacific subregions. The achievement of poverty reduction, there is progress as we talked in the beginning, but this is threatened by very rampant natural disasters. So we need to enhance the resilience of development and infrastructure so that the hard-won gains are not reversed and lost in a moment when the disasters strike. We also need to provide universal access to drinking water and sanitation services because they also impact or impinge on poverty reduction efforts. And inadequate government spending on education, health services, and social protection is very visible when you compare South Asia with other subregions. So we need to devote greater proportion of resources to health, education, and social protection. The goal 5 on gender equality, we see a mixed progress in terms of political participation of women is increasing as you see more women in the parliaments and elected bodies, but gender gaps continue to remain in the women's economic participation and decision making. So you find very few members of the boards that are women in the in corporate sector, for instance. Inequalities certainly need to be curbed, and climate action and sustainability agenda needs to be pursued with greater vigor. And finally, the means of implementation, especially the financial resources for SDGs, need to be augmented. Yes, coming to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been affecting life across the world, we find that South and Southwest Asia region, subregion in Asia Pacific, among all these subregions, I think is one of the worst affected, and in particular the labor income losses, because a lot of people lost jobs in this period since last year after the lockdowns were effected in most of the countries or all the countries. And you see the incidence of labor income losses due to working hour losses in 2020, in South and Southwest Asia at 13.5%, to be the highest among all subregions of Asia Pacific region. Similarly, the foregone opportunities for students, are again very high. The average days of foregone instruction between February and September alone were 127 days. So in South and Southwest Asia, so nearly half of the 850 million students that were affected by school closures were in South and Southwest Asia subregion. And this also is something which affects the nutritional outcomes, because in South Asia, the school children get midday meals, and for many children, these midday meals comprise the only nutritious meals for many children. So not only that they are missing education in the schools, but they are also missing access to nutritious meals. So this is a kind of a double whammy for the children of the subregion. Now, Gemma, my colleague from Statistics Division, talked about the continued lack of good indicators and data for SDG monitoring. And, this is also applicable to South and Southwest Asia. So enough data for tracking subregions progress is available for only slightly more than half of SDG indicators, and data gaps remain mainly in gender and environmental related goals, which are actually very critical for monitoring SDG progress. So we need to strengthen the data gathering effort, and it is important to accelerate production of disaggregated data so that we can identify who is being left behind, because SDG's premise is leaving no one behind. So that is something we need to make progress on. Then I want to share a few key takeaways from the fourth South Asia Forum on SDGs, which was held in December, in the beginning of December, on 2nd and 3rd of December, hosted jointly by UN ESCAP South and Southwest Asia Office and the government of Maldives. And this is a sub-regional preparatory to Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which takes place next week. And so some of the key messages from this discussion, which was a truly multi-stakeholder discussion, were that severe socioeconomic effects of the COVID pandemic threaten to reverse SDG gains in South Asia in particular, in terms of impact on extreme poverty, which might go up. Poverty reduction efforts must focus on multi-dimensional aspects of poverty, because it is not enough to just provide income support to the poor, but we need to look after all their basic needs, including education, health, and social protection. The need for an action plan for strengthening social protection systems. The ESCAP member states have adopted an action plan for Asia Pacific region on social protection. Perhaps South Asian countries need to also move in that direction. Then importance of addressing gender disparities was highlighted, including through promotion of women's entrepreneurship. And the stakeholders in that South Asia SDG Forum advocated greater investment in structural transformation for job creation, and the environmental sustainability of the economic development was very much emphasized. They asked for or advocated for mobilizing greater resources for SDG, including through green bonds, through mobilizing public-private partnerships, by phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, and by raising carbon taxes. They wanted harnessing of emerging technologies and digital transformation, because this COVID pandemic has demonstrated the criticality of the digital divide that may affect the access to services by citizens. And so we need to close those gaps in the digital infrastructure. Digital divide needs to be closed, and strengthening statistical capacity for monitoring SDG progress. And finally, there was a strong endorsement of sub-regional cooperation for fostering sustainable and resilient recovery from COVID-19 in South Asia. And the stakeholders felt that UNESCAP, with its sub-regional platform, could play an important role in facilitating the sub-regional cooperation, including in promoting the sharing of good practices across the sub-region in SDG achievement, including through the new platform it has created, South Asia Network on SDGs. Now, this is about the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which, as I mentioned earlier, happens or begins on 23rd of March. So stay tuned to this. This will be a larger regional, debate and discussion on how to advance the sustainable development goals in Asia Pacific region. And the South Asia SDG Forum, which I was just briefing you about, will feed into this this broader regional forum, which takes place next week. So this is a slide about the SDG Gateway, and Gemma already briefed you about this gateway, which provides country SDG profiles, country comparisons, and SDG data availability, which is the status of that you can check. And then the recent new addition to this is the National SDG Tracker in the Asia Pacific region. What is on the horizon and how can you get involved? She briefed about this. It's a very useful tool and good addition to the SDG monitoring tool. And so with that, I end my presentation, and we will be happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh. We have a few questions in the chat box, and few questions we have got when the participants registered, and we have quite a good number of questions. So if you permit me, I can segregate them into the groupings, and then I can put it through so that you can answer.
Yes.
There are three types of question. One is about general, about the regional approaches, and then country specific. So what I will do is I will first go to the regional perspective, because that is what we have been working for, and it might be important to highlight some of these issues, and then we go to the country one. In terms of South Asia, there is one question which talks about a climate change, saying that the Himalayan and Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, etc., play a very important part of these countries and the region's prosperity. But what is that, in which direction we are moving, and how UN agencies could help towards the climate change? The second question also maybe you would like to answer is on but then that question is on the pandemic. So maybe I'll club all questions on pandemic first. You can answer on the climate change, and then I go to the pandemic one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question about the climate change. Climate change, I hardly need to emphasize that it is a trend which is affecting South Asia region more than any other region in terms of the frequency of extreme weather events that we have witnessed over the past year, and how most of these extreme weather events and disasters are taking a cross-border dimension, and they are becoming increasingly more virulent. In the past year, while the subregion has faced the pandemic, we've also witnessed 4 or 5 tropical storms hitting the coastline of South Asian countries. There were floods and droughts, flash floods recently also in the hills of India, the Himachal Pradesh. So there are many very severe extreme weather events and natural disasters. This is all happening because we haven't paid enough attention to the climate change. And so we need to really go and deliver on the climate related goals and targets of SDGs and the Paris Agreement with the greater attention, greater sincerity and commitment. And UN agencies, of course, are very much supporting their member states in that. But my feeling is that we need to get our act together at all different levels, local levels, sub-national levels, national levels, and also sub-regional and regional cooperation, because most of these natural disasters and climate events are happening and taking cross-border dimension. We need to work together to mitigate them together, and also take steps to clean up the environment, reduce, recycle, and reuse. This RRR kind of behavioral changes need to be there. We need to rely more on renewable energy and bring down emissions. So all of these things need to be done with greater commitment and vigor. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh. I put through a few questions, and they have come from the varied participants, covering Roshni from Colombo, then Gaurav, his correspondent, Economic Times India, and then from Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Pradyumna in Nepal. And they have been talking about a few specific cases. The question is about what has been the progress of achievement of South Asia countries on SDGs, and how the pandemic has affected the progress, and what kind of regional cooperation or regional mechanism, I mean, basically they meant perhaps sub-regional mechanism in South Asia, needs to be taken to accelerate the progress in the South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question and a very overarching one. So first of all, progress of South Asian countries on SDGs and how it was affected by the pandemic. I think we were talking about the progress of South Asian countries on the SDGs, and then the record is mixed. On a few goals and targets, we seem to be making some progress, but we are regressing on some, and we are not making sufficient progress in others. So there was this chart in the presentation, and also it is there in the report. But the pandemic is likely to have affected this sub-region very severely in terms of economic and social development. For instance, at the beginning, when the pandemic was, really getting very severe in last year, in 2020, in June, we made some analysis, and we did some simulations in computable general equilibrium model to see how much of the impact this pandemic could have, for instance, on poverty. And we found some very staggering numbers that up to 132 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty if no action was taken. Of course, action was taken by governments. Governments in every single country, mobilized resources for stimulus packages, for supporting the poor and vulnerable people, and the social protection programs were expanded. So the incidence of the potential incidence on extreme poverty was contained. But this is something very clear that a lot of people have lost jobs, and then they are being supported by government, but there must be some who are not able to access the support programs of the government. So there are very big challenges that the South Asian countries have faced and are continuing to face. The economic growth has been actually contracting in many of the countries, first time in 40 years. And the regional cooperation or sub-regional cooperation is extremely important for coming out of this situation and building back better. And so a number of reports have been issued by UN ESCAP and other regional bodies, which show the potential of regional economic cooperation and other areas of cooperation, including sharing of good practices. For instance, how different countries have come up with the applications of digital technology to contain the damage and and use the services provided by government through digital means. So there are very important possibilities of learning from each other, sharing these practices, good practices, and replicating them. And then also, because global trade is shrinking, the exploitation of potential of mutual trade in South Asia provides an important avenue for driving economic growth and jobs all across. And for that, we have advocated strengthening the transport connectivity in the sub-region and facilitating trade at the borders so that the supply chains are continuing to remain open and accessible. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh. There is another question which is on the sub-region and comparing with the region of Asia and Pacific. I think it needs some clarification from your side because yes, people they get confused. The basic question is being asked is how the facts and figures for the sub-region, especially in the South and Southwest or Southeast Asia, compared to the findings of Asia and Pacific. And is it safe to assume that there are again differences within the countries in the South Asia sub-region, at least on their SDG performance? Definitely, yes. We have not shown that in the country slide, but we reflected, but maybe you can elaborate the process a little bit. And then the question is on again relating to pandemic, that if there are a lot of restrictions which are there, and if these restrictions are now being lifted, so would it lead to avoidance of adverse impact on people, like you just touched upon, borders being closed and restrictive practices being followed? And after that, then I will ask you one last set of questions on the countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajan. Again, very good question. I think Gemma in her presentation had a slide which showed the sub-regional, the variation across the sub-regions. And what was striking there is that, for instance, inequalities are widening, or the trend is reversing the progress in South and Southwest Asia and the Pacific. In other sub-regions of Asia Pacific, for instance, there is no such widening of inequalities. So South Asia region has to really address the issue of rising inequalities, which is not a major issue for other sub-regions of Asia Pacific region, except for the Pacific Islands. So, similarly, the industrial development, the goal 9, for instance, is not a big challenge for Southeast Asia and East Asia, because they have done very well on industrialization. However, in South Asia, we are lagging behind in terms of our structural transformation and industrialization, which also leads to more decent jobs, that could be created when you industrialize a country. So there are such differences, but there are some common patterns which are about the sustainability related goals and targets. So all the sub-regions of Asia Pacific need to strengthen their efforts for enhancing sustainability of the development process. Now, coming back to the within South Asia, I think there are differences across South Asian countries also. For instance, with respect to economic growth, while some countries were affected much more deeply, some were able to contain the damage. And Bangladesh is one country which has managed to still post positive growth rates, although lower than its the trend of very robust growth rates that Bangladesh has been posting over the past more than a decade. But it did not slid into the recession like countries like India did. And so there are variations across the sub-region, between the countries. And also in terms of managing the impact of the pandemic, most governments got into action rather quickly, and of course stimulus packages of very high proportion of GDP were mobilized, and Bhutan had the highest proportion of stimulus package percentage of GDP at 14%. India had about 7.5%, but there were a lot of other monetary stimuluses, and if you add them all together, it will be more than 10%. So there are variations in terms of impacts across the sub-region, and also in terms of the management of that from the government side. And this effort needs to continue all the way through in 2021, because the recovery which is visible is all is there, but it is very fragile. It needs to be really strengthened through continued stimulation of the economic activity by the governments. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Nageshji. We have a couple of minutes now, so I will just put through a last set of questions. And this question comes for specific to India, asking that how has India progressed? What is your take in by when India can achieve the SDGs? And especially also the questions are on SDG 6 and 11, asking about how India is progressing and how South Asia looks on these SDG 6 and 11. But more focus is on India. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajan. Yeah, this is a very interesting question, by when India can achieve SDGs. I think my feeling is that India has made a lot of socio-economic progress over the past decades, and it has achieved a number of goals in MDG era. For instance, India was able to bring down the poverty levels more than required, and so there is a lot of effort that has been done on the different aspects of the SDG agenda. And as we have seen in the beginning, in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of reduction of hunger, and providing healthcare facilities. There are a lot of goals on which India has moved in a very robust manner, and there are many programs of the government that are very much aligned with the SDG priorities. For instance, Ayushman Bharat. For instance, the open defecation free India, the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. So there are many such programs, Ujjwala scheme. So all of these programs, which are flagship programs of the government, are very well aligned with SDG priorities. India is also moving forward in terms of the renewable energy targets, a very ambitious goal. Yeah. I was talking about the number of programs started by the government of India, including Swachh Bharat, the Ayushman Bharat, the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. All of these Ujjwala scheme and very ambitious targets for the renewable energy. They all are very well aligned with the SDG priorities. So if government of India, as a country, moves very expeditiously on completing these own national targets, they will help India to achieve all of the SDG goals by themselves. So I think what I can see is that the direction in which the country is moving in terms of economic policy and social policy are very well aligned with the SDG goals and targets. And there is no reason, if the government moves with the kind of resolve it has shown in the past few years, it continues the same kind of commitment and resolve to achieving these goals and targets, the country would be very well poised to achieve all the SDG goals. And I must also not forget to talk about Jan Dhan Yojana, which is a scheme for financial inclusion of the poor. And some 400 million accounts have been opened in last few years. So this is the kind of accelerated progress that the country has shown to be making on some of the SDG priorities. So I have no doubt in my mind that India is very well poised to achieve the SDGs, and this is the beginning of the decade of acceleration and consolidate. So this is when all of these efforts should be really taken to their logical conclusion. I'll end here. Thank you. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Nagesh ji. I think we have now done all the questions, and I will not mention about those comments which have been praising you a lot about your presentation and saying it has been excellent presentation. Few suggestions have been made that they would like to get the PowerPoint, and we will be uploading these PowerPoints on our website if you can allow. So maybe thank you everybody, and thank you Dr. Nagesh for your excellent presentation on behalf of all the participants. Maybe 1 or 2 minutes if you want to say something extra, you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed joining all of you, and of course, the South Asia SDG discussion is something we have to engage everyone over all the time. This is not one-off. It's a continued engagement with all of you and all the stakeholders in the civil society. So only through this complete engagement and a whole of the society approach that South Asia can achieve the enormous challenge that it has before it in terms of achieving these goals and targets. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Those who have joined late, you can, the report is available on the website, so you can go to ESCAP website, it is available. And thank you very much for being with us here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.